Hey everyone, it's Benny. It's the start of 2021, and I've already seen people talk about the top vehicles they recommend everyone own. I'm gonna go a step further. I'm gonna talk about vehicles that every player by now should eventually be able to save up for. Now, we know the Cayo Perico heist is putting out millions every hour, or every few hours, whatever. Point is, it's a lot of money. So there's no excuse now that people shouldn't be able to save up for these. Now, I will say this, if you're too lazy, go ahead and do Bogdans. I don't care anymore. I know people are going to do them regardless, and they are extremely boring in my opinion, but money's money, and I'm going to talk about what everyone should be able to save up for eventually. Now, you do not have to have all of these vehicles to be successful, but there are vehicles that I have owned for a long time and that have gotten me through some really difficult missions and even some PvP scenarios. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get this list started. And I'm going to start this off with a very controversial one, but it's one that I cannot ignore. You will need to either own an Oppressor Mark I or II, and I decided to include both of these since they basically serve the same function. One is just arguably better than the other, depending on which one you like more. Now, the Oppressor Mark I is extremely fast, has a very quick recharging boost that you can use basically anytime you're on the ground. Whenever you touch the ground or some kind of a surface, the boost will recharge, and it recharges in, I think, about a second, or like a couple or a few seconds. I don't know exactly, but it's a fast recharging boost. And it is not the most nimble, but you can go up, you can go down, and I've personally feel like I've mastered the flight on this, although I'm still not the best. I actually have a close friend who is way better at using this thing, and I've seen him absolutely nail targets just by free aiming missiles. It packs exactly 20 missiles, and the missiles, though they do not have the best tracking, they have tracking that is almost as good as the Oppressor Mark II. They're not as good, but they are still good. And as for calling it in, the Oppressor Mark I doesn't have a cooldown. They only did that with the Oppressor Mark II. The Mark II has a 5-minute cooldown. It also packs 20 missiles, although the tracking on the Mark II is way better. The missiles are far more accurate. Now, the Oppressor Mark II is a controversial one, I know, but I had to include it on this list. This thing is undoubtedly a very valuable vehicle to have. It can also be stored in the Terabyte, which makes grinding CEO stuff way easier. You can also do client jobs and all that with the Terabyte and the Mark II, but we'll get into that later. The Mark II is arguably the vehicle that forever changed GTA Online, and I still feel like it should be nerfed. But while it is extremely overpowered, it is also extremely useful. And as much as I hate this thing, I can't deny how useful it's been. What I recommend doing is eventually get one of each. Have an Oppressor Mark I and an Oppressor Mark II. Primarily use the Oppressor Mark II, and then if that gets destroyed or if you can't call it in because of cooldown, have a Mark I as a backup. And I recommend getting good at both of them. Now, I do know that you need to go through the bunker research. That's something I do recommend everyone go through eventually, is the bunker research, because the missiles on the Mark I are useful. However, even if you don't have the missiles on either one, the Mark II and the Oppressor Mark I are both really good for getting around the map. You can see here I'm doing a headhunter with the Oppressor Mark II, and I'm just blazing through the targets. Now, I know that there are faster vehicles to do headhunter. Personally, my top record is with the Savage helicopter, but the Mark II is just overall the easiest vehicle to use for grinding. And because of how overpowered it is, I've been able to do so many missions with this thing, and so have so many other people. As much as I hate this vehicle, it's arguably extremely useful. So, just please do not use this as a griefing tool. That's all I ask. Moving on, I wanted to talk about the Terabyte. Now, the Mark II goes hand in hand with the Terabyte, and these two combined are honestly two vehicles that literally everyone should have at some point, I think at least. Now, the Terabyte is extremely useful, although it does have some paywalls you have to go through. The Terabyte itself, in order to have that, you need to have a nightclub. But the nightclub is something you want to get way later on. Now, I'm not going to talk about the nightclub because that's something in itself. But the Terabyte is an essential if you want to really grind some money. Now, you don't have to have it at first. This is an investment you make way later on when you have enough, businesses to justify buying the nightclub. You buy all of your other businesses first, you save the nightclub for either last or close to last, and then you're able to grind businesses way easier because you can source supplies and, best of all, CEO crates from here. It also includes a weapon workshop, which honestly on its own is another thing you have to have eventually. All in all, the Terabyte is just basically a hub, and you're able to do so much from this thing, and I still use it to this day. And it's honestly a lot of fun for PvP. It's really creative in that sense, because when you're in the back of this thing, if you get hit by an orb, just like with the MOC or the Avenger, it will not count as a kill. Your vehicle gets blown up, but you don't die. It just kind of kicks you out. And it does have the option for a missile battery, though the missiles are not accurate at all. It's unlimited, and they're slow firing, unfortunately, but it's kind of a unique weapon. Not the best, not the greatest, but overall, the Terabyte is just a really good multi-tool, or it's a multi-use tool for anyone who really wants to get into grinding. Now, of course, I do recommend everyone have some kind of MC business. It, for the most part, doesn't matter what it is. The one I'm using for this example is it's the document forgery. That's one I don't think you have to have. I just do this because why not? It's just something to do. But you can get any of the other four, and those will be profitable. That's the cocaine, which is the best one. You have the meth, the counterfeit cash, and weed farm. The counterfeit cash you can get for free if you happen to have the starter pack. But let's face it, it's a rip-off, so most people probably won't have the starter pack. Either way, I recommend everyone have at least one or two good MC businesses. Now, I have the locations out in the city just because, for personal reasons, but I recommend having the ones out in the desert because overall, those are the best locations. They're way cheaper, and they're relatively close to the city, and it's better to sell in the city because even though there's more players in the city, you're able to weave between stuff and dodge them. Overall, the MC businesses are still useful, and I know what you're thinking, but Benny, the Cayo Perico heist, it completely outdoes it. Well, yeah, but these are passive businesses, which means you can have these running in the background while you're doing active income, like for instance, the heist. And especially worth mentioning is I recorded this footage during a double money event week, which means you could make even twice as much. Like, basically, in short, these go on double money a lot, and it's good to have these just in case. And if you have a lot of friends to help out, you can go back to back with these and actually make a lot of money on the side with the heist. It's always important to remember to grind both active and passive income. I feel like a lot of people forget that. Now, one fair warning before you do buy the businesses is that raids will happen a lot with these. So always run the MC businesses with friends, just so that if stuff goes wrong or if you do need help, that you'll have it. I do recommend getting the MC businesses later on. That's not something you'll go on by first. Another one that I definitely wanted to include in this list is the Sparrow helicopter. Don't get this confused with the Sea Sparrow. That is a completely different vehicle. Although I do think that vehicle is useful. This one is arguably one of the most useful vehicles that we have ever gotten. I was actually contemplating whether I wanted to choose a Sparrow or the Buzzard, but honestly, the Buzzard, even though it is the OG, this thing just completely outdoes it. It does everything the Buzzard does and better. You have to buy this with a Kasatka submarine, which we'll get to later. But the Sparrow is very agile. It's very fast. It's actually a slight bit faster than the Oppressor Mark II, and I've done the test, so I know this for sure. But it's very fast, it's very nimble, it's a small helicopter, which means you're able to fit in some tight spaces, and it has unlimited missiles, which you can fire repeatedly, and they are lock-on. All in all, this thing is just so practical, and when you're doing heists and you have this stored in the back of the submarine, it's just such a helpful vehicle. Now, that brings us to the next one, which is the Kasaka submarine. This thing is, well, it's a Cayo Perico mobile. It's this is the vehicle you have to buy from Warstock if you want to run Cayo Perico heists. The best part about the Cayo Perico heist is that this is the only paywall. The Sparrow is recommended, but it's not necessary. But I do recommend having the Sparrow with the sub. But it's just such a good moneymaker, I had to include it in the list. And speaking of submarines, let's talk about the Stromberg and the Terriador. I wanted to include these hand in hand because I know that a lot of people can't afford the Terriador. So the Stromberg, if you run through the Doomsday heist, which I don't think any new players are going to be able to do, just because of how difficult that heist is. But if for whatever reason you do have the trade price for the Stromberg, this is a really good budget option. It's like the Terriador, and this was a vehicle that's been in the game for a long time. And at one point I considered this an essential. It has really good missiles, and it packs 30 of them. They're fast firing, which means you can spray them if you want to. And the tracking on them, though not as good as say, the Ruiner, they're actually pretty on par with the Oppressor Mark II, which makes this a really good counter. It also has decent armor, tanking between 6 and 8 missiles usually. And it's pretty fast. I mean, it is a sports car technically. It's an old, I want to say it's some kind of an old Ferrari. I mean, the brand name is based off Jaguar, which, I really don't know if this is based on IRL, but it is a really nice sports car, and it is very fast. But where this thing really shines is in combat. It is a submarine car, you can go underwater, it does pack 60 torpedoes. But this thing really shines in combat situations. And that brings us to the Terriador. The Terriador, which you're about to see a clip of in the next few seconds, is like the Stromberg. It has similar performance, and it does have similar missiles. But there's a lot of key differences with the Terriador. The Terriador is slightly faster, has a boost, which you can recharge very quickly, even faster than the Vigilante, I believe. It also has unlimited missiles, and the missiles have very similar tracking to the Stromberg, which is really good. And on top of that, it's a 4-seater, which means that for whatever reason you had to hold 4 people, you will have that option. You can also boost while underwater, which I didn't even think was possible. And the best part is that this is finally probably one of the best counters we've had to the Oppressor Mark II. I do think everyone should have a Mark II, but when stuff goes south and you don't have a Mark II, or if you don't have access to it, this thing is a Mark II killer. And it does take a lot of practice to master, but it is a vehicle I do recommend everyone have, even if it's just to fight hostile Oppressor Mark IIs. Moving on from the ground vehicles, let's talk about some more air vehicles. I do recommend everyone eventually own a hangar. Now, I have this hangar at LSIA, but the arguably more useful hangars are for Zancudo. Get whichever ones you want, but know that although the Zancudo hangars are more expensive, they are way more practical. They're more towards the center of the map, which makes them better for getting around and collecting the crates. And they also allow you to use a free laser, which you can steal for missions. You can just steal a laser, you only get 2 stars, and you're able to steal it way easier. But let's talk about vehicles you're able to buy. Now, the first aircraft I recommend everyone have early on is the Rogue. A lot of people overlook this plane, but it is arguably one of the most practical planes in the entire game. It's not that good of a dogfighter. The turn circle is pretty average. But it is very fast, it is very nimble, although the handling is very twitchy. But that's good. This thing takes a lot of practice to use, and it's a great plane for learning the basics on how to dogfight and how to fly. It's also great for missions. Since the machine guns are a bit explosive, it makes it good for playing missions and fighting NPC planes. This thing is okay for dogfighting. It's not the best. There's way better dogfighters like the Starling and the Pyro, but we're talking about vehicles that everyone should own at some point, not just PvP players. It also has missiles, although the missiles are more on par with the laser and Hydra because you can only shoot 2 at a time. It also can drop bombs, and although this thing isn't the best bomber, it is very good for it once you learn how to fly. And it can also carry a passenger. So I like to use this thing as a rescue plane sometimes. Like if my friend gets stranded out in the desert and they can't call in a personal vehicle, if you're able to land this thing, it's a really good plane to pick them up in. And on top of that, you can give your friend the option to use countermeasures or bombs. You can do that through the interaction menu. Overall, this is just a really good multi-purpose plane, and personally, it's my favorite in the game. I'm gonna get a lot of disagrees on that, but the Rogue is my personal favorite. Moving on from planes, let's talk about the helicopters. So this one will be up to personal preference, and I know a lot of people absolutely hate the Annihilator stealth. I don't. I love this thing. It is overpriced, granted, but it is one of two I recommend everyone get, either this or the Akula. Let's talk about pros and cons though. The Annihilator stealth has no armor, so you're not going to be using this in PvP most likely. But what it does have, it can carry 6 people, which is already an advantage. You have the option to rappel, which just gives it that fun factor. It has plenty of customization with liveries and paints. And the best part, in my opinion, is that it's very easy to fly. It's not all wobbly and stuff like the Akula is. However, depending on your playstyle, the Akula might be more your speed. It does have armor, which means it is very forgiving in PvP. If you get hit by an explosive, you'll be able to tank it and move on. It also, just like the Annihilator, has the option for barrage or homing. They both have that option, although you can only have one at a time. Now, the Akula is way more wobbly, although once you master a flight, you kind of get used to it. It also has the option to drop bombs, which, you know, the Annihilator doesn't. And you can carry 4 people, not as many as the Akula, but you can carry passengers. And it is just, it's way better for PvP because it packs more of a punch. But the Annihilator is just the most forgiving helicopter when it comes to general gameplay. Get whichever one you want. I know most people will get the Akula, but you definitely need to have a stealth helicopter at one point, just so you can get around the map safely. Now let's talk about amphibious vehicles. I was trying to decide between this and the Sea Sparrow, but you know, the Sea Sparrow is way more expensive, and everyone will probably have a regular Sparrow anyway. So I went with the Sea Breeze, and there are a lot of reasons I chose this plane. For one, it's a decently fast plane, and it is very nimble, which means if you had to, you could defend yourself in a dogfight. It's not the best, granted, but it is pretty decent. The machine guns are very well centered, and it is very fast and very nimble. It's also a great plane for bombing. It has the option to carry bombs, and you can actually be very, very steady with this thing. This is an advantage it has over the Rogue with bombing. The handling on this thing is not twitchy, which means you have a lot of control over it. It also can do hard water landings. That's something not a lot of vehicles are able to do. But as long as you're at least somewhat stable when landing on the water, you won't damage the engine. And I love using this thing as a rescue plane. Like I said, if my friend gets stranded out somewhere, I like to have vehicles that I can use to go pick them up. And the Sea Breeze does that really well, because I can land on the water close to where my friend is. If he gets stranded out in sea and he doesn't want an easy way out, I can come over here, pick him up, and then leave. And this thing is very quick with takeoff too. And it's very difficult to land on the road, but it is very easy to land and take off, especially on the water. I recommend everyone have at least one amphibious aircraft, and if I had to pick one, it would be the Sea Breeze. This thing is also relatively cheap. It's the cheapest amphibious aircraft that's actually worth a damn. Now let's talk about civilian cars. I recommend everyone have a very fast sports car, and I was trying to decide between this, the Italia GTO, and the Italia RSX, and I went with this one. This is the Pariah. This is probably one of, if not the fastest sports car in the entire game. This thing is a supercar killer. Like, it's just so goddamn fast. The handling is pretty bad, and it takes a lot of getting used to. But This thing is arguably the most competitive in races. I have beat it before with the Italia GTO and the RSX, but overall, the Pariah is just the best one. It's also the cheapest. Now, it's still expensive, costing over 1.4, but it is definitely a car that any car enthusiast should have. Now, moving on to a different topic real quick, the arcade. I know that the Casino Heist is outdated now, but I do recommend everyone play this as well as the Classic Heist for the experience. Now, to run the Classic Heist, you have to own a high-end apartment. That's easy. High-end apartments are relatively cheap. But I think a lot of people forgot just how much money the arcade made everyone back just literally just last year. You do have the option to buy more arcade machines, which gets you daily income in the safe. But that's not where all the main money is. The main money is in the heist itself. The Casino Heist used to be the best way to make money. That was literally just a year ago. I don't know if people forgot, but only a year ago, the Casino Heist came out, and it broke GTA Online's economy a little bit. Like, it made so much money. Now, it doesn't make as much as the Perico Heist, but it is a good money maker, and even just for the experience, you don't get bored of stuff to do, this is a great investment. You also have the option of buying the Master Control Terminal, which allows you to run all of your various businesses. Now, I will give this warning, have at least one friend to help you out with the Casino Heist, because while it is a great way to make money, it requires another person. And if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to have someone to show you the ropes. Now, moving on to the final spot on this list, the Benefactor Krieger. I was trying to decide between this and a few other supercars like the Emirates, but I went with the Krieger just because it is the best all around. It has insane top speed and really stable handling. It also has a good amount of customization, including some liveries. Now, the Emirates is a bit faster, but the Krieger is just the best overall. I swear, driving this thing is like driving an F1 car. It's just so damn fast and it corners so well. Now, this one is probably, if not the most expensive one on this list. It is, I believe, 2.8 million. But it is something I recommend anyone have, especially if they love racing. Now, I love racing in this game. I've always been a car enthusiast. And this car is, as much of it is a meta, it's something I believe everyone should have if they do racing. Just because it's so damn fast. You can substitute it with other cars at some point, but to do that, you have to be able to afford to try all of them out. But anyway, that's my top list of vehicles everyone should own. It's really in no particular order, and a lot of these you'll have to save up for later on, but they are important vehicles to have. Now, you can get these pretty much any order you want. By all means, do it however you want, get the money however you want. If you need if you need to do a bunch of Bogdans or Cardus to get started, whatever. It's your game, play how you want. But when you have all of these, you shouldn't need to do all those bugs and glitches, because like these are really good money makers, all of them in different ways. And on top of that, they are just a lot of fun. Now, I'm a legit grinder, you guys know that. I don't even bother with those glitches. And it's because I've used all of these vehicles, I combine different methods, and I've made so much money over time. And I'm also sorry this video took so long, there was just so much to go over, but that's it for now. Leave a like if you found this helpful, and subscribe to support my channel. I'm sorry my voice sounds a bit off, I've got a little bit of a head cold because of, spring, but